Hello everyone, it's Nikki Batgirl D'Angelo here for another Let's Play Kerbal Space Program. Alright, so we took our space probe, our moon lander, to the moon the last time, and we got a chance to unlock some extra parts, and you're seeing them here. Well, this time out, we're going to do something different. We are going to take a capsule with a man in it to the moon. And moon spelled M, U at the umlaut above it, N. And to do that, we're going to need a little bit more delta V. Now, I'm definitely going to overdo it here, and I'm going to build a rocket that costs a bunch of money, but I'm going to try to get a bunch of these different missions accomplished at the same time. What you see me doing right now is building my asparagus staging into the spaceship so I can maximize the fuel efficiency of this thing. But again, I am overdoing it. I just wanted to get the skipper on one of my ships, and these new KW rocketry engines, which you see these dual engines, which kind of mimic the Gemini Titan engines. These are similar to what pushed the Gemini capsules up into orbit, which were the first two-manned spaceships that the United States had. Well, we're going to move ahead from here and just get to the part where we get ready to launch this baby. Now, we're not looking for optimal windows or anything like that. We're just going to go and we're going to take off. Now, we have a couple of mods here. This is some kind of mod I have that will let me do science a lot more easily. It automatically tells you when you're over a biome that might contain some science that you haven't gotten. And I have MechJeb running, and MechJeb I'm using for the Delta V stats, you can see over to the right. After we get into orbit, I will use it to fire off my maneuvering nodes, only because I find that tedious, and I really like the building of the ships and the flying of the ships in the landing modes, better than just trying to intercept planets and get into orbit, which becomes very routine if you've done it a couple of thousand times. Which I have done, believe it or not, over the last couple of years that I've owned this. I guess it's going on 3 years at this point. Still love this game though. So this rocket has a ton of Delta V in it, as you can see. And it is going to have no problem getting into orbit. And thus getting into a situation where we can get into orbit around the moon eventually. Alright, let's move ahead. This is the boring part, and get us into orbit. Here we are just about 2 minutes later, and we're starting to flatten out our ascent, and we're going to start pushing right towards the horizon and set up our final burn to get us into orbit. Now, we are doing pretty well here. We're going to want to accelerate up to orbital velocity and just push this out a little bit to 75,000 kilometers. So let's fire at the horizon, push out our apoapsis, and going ever so slightly faster. Now, I built a lot of Delta V into this and probably spent a little bit more money than I should have on this rocket, but we are going to pretty much make this a very successful flight. And our wonderful Valentina Kerman, who I think is on this. No, actually, I believe we sent Bill up to the moon. And Bill is our scientist, and he's going to be able to do things like reset the goo containers and reset the Science Junior and the thermometers and the pressure sensors. They're going to be great. It's going to be a wonderful time for this. All right, so we're going to tell MechJeb to kick this off just by telling it to execute the next node, which honestly is just counting down to whatever the burn time is. So if the burn time is a minute, you want to start it 30 seconds before you hit your apoapsis. So you burn 30 seconds before the apoapsis and 30 seconds after. That way you get a much more even, push into orbit. And you don't mess up and become a little bit eccentric in your orbit. Alright, so we're pulling up, and MechJeb is going to execute the burn for us in just a few seconds. We have a couple more places that we could get some science and we could send it back. Oh, we're not going to send it back, we're just going to get it. And here we go, pushing out. And there we go. And we are In orbit. It was that easy. Not too hard, right?
Whatever you do, don't get
Flying
attached to
spaceships isn't
anybody.
rocket science, I'm telling you. Coming up with the maneuvering nodes is the rocket science. Now, they give us this little tool here where we could create a node and draw it out. In reality, there's a lot of mathematics going into this and a lot of checklists that the astronauts have to follow to make these things happen. Today, it's all done by computers. Autopilot is a astronaut's best friend. Now think of it this way. There isn't a spaceship flown out of the influence of Earth today that's flown manually. Everything has to have programmed autopilots in it to execute all the maneuvers that they need. Oh boy, we don't want that there. Let's kill it. So here we are pulling out our maneuvering node and just trying to get an intercept of the moon. Shouldn't be too hard, right? So we draw it out, and it's actually, we should have moved the maneuvering node off to where, from what we're looking at right now, probably about the 8 o'clock position. So let's see. Yep, it worked. Oh, and we're going to pull it back the other way, and we're essentially going to get this node set up and then tell MechJeb to fly it for us. Again, not a hell of a lot of difficulty in this maneuver. Just, again, tedious at best. Alright, not bad, right? We got our maneuvering node, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to push out to the moon. So let's move ahead. So we're right where we're going to execute the burn to get us into the influence of moon. And MechJeb is doing all the work for us here. And of course, MechJeb is going to do all the work for a good reason. MechJeb can do tedious tasks like fire a rocket engine for 1 minute and 14 or 40 seconds, whatever it says over there, and get us into the influence of the moon. So you can see it counting down now, little by little, burning. So in this flight, very simple. It's going to be the first landing on the moon by a Kerbal, and we're going to gain as much science as we can. We're bringing Bill with us, I believe, because he's just badass, and he can actually handle the science better than a pilot can. Now, in reality, we went there with 3 people. We had a pilot that stayed up in the command module, we had a pilot that went into the lunar excursion module, and we had a scientist aboard. And those were none other than on Apollo 11, Michael Collins up in the Aquarius, maybe? I think that was it. And then in the Eagle, we had none other than Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And Buzz Aldrin was the second person on the moon. Not many people remember his name. But Neil Armstrong was the pilot that actually had to do a manual landing. He had to avoid a couple of boulders and move the landing site just a little bit away. And that is actually a hard thing to do, since the Lunar Excursion Module, the LEM, was burdened with not having a lot of fuel to do that type of evasive maneuvers. So he was actually able to get that done pretty quickly. So here we see our burn going. Not bad, right? It's a very low power engine I put on this thing. I was going more for efficiency than for the actual thrust. Probably change it out next time. At the back end of the burn, we see us coming little by little right into the perfect approach that we had here. No problem, and we got it. So the next thing that we do is we set our focus to the moon, and we'll do that in just a few seconds, and then we're going to set up our orbital insertion burn, which is as you're nearing the moon, you're going to fire towards your retrograde marker. So it looks like we're going to have a little bit of a eccentric orbit. Well, a lot of inclination here. Sorry. A lot of inclination. It shouldn't be so bad. We'll try to lift it up just a little bit. We're not going to be able to do it that great because we're going to eat up most of our... By doing this, we're going to eat up most of our delta V. So we'll just try to get us into orbit. And then we'll push ahead and get us to the point where we're going to fire and land on the surface. And one of the best things about having MechJeb do your burns is that MechJeb has the opportunity to actually stop the warp in an instant after doing like a warp at 10,000 to be able to get you into the perfect position for firing at your node. Now, if you try this on your own, a lot of times what happens is that you fail at executing the maneuver to stop time warp, and you wind up on the other side of the periapsis where you're supposed to fire. Now, one of the bad things I did with this rocket is I left the influence of Kerbal without actually getting out these panels. Now, I didn't use the panels that are able to retract again. That was my bad, but, you know, big deal. Each one of these different pods over here actually has on it a solar panel, a probe core, and a couple of thermometers and an antenna. Now, they are fuel tanks, and I'm going to use them and get right down to the surface and land, and they're going to offset the weight a little bit. The second thing that they're going to do is they're going to stay behind, and I'm just going to use the fuel in the center stage over there to get off of the moon and get back to Kerbal. Now, the big thing here is, why am I leaving these back? Why did I spend so much money? Well, from time to time, you get something that says, you know, send back a science data from the moon. And I can do that now without having to send somebody all the way up there to do that. Eventually, we'll have a moon base that could do that. But I thought that this would be pretty cool, and it wasn't that much more expensive. Why did I do 4? Well, everything in the space program uses double and triple and quadruple redundancy. And in the next episode, you may see why I did this. Okay, let's move ahead to the good part. We should be in orbit now. Let's move ahead to the part where we actually start to land. Funny thing is, I left this ship orbiting the moon when friends came over on Tuesday night. And I went out and I grilled and had a few drinks with my girlfriends from my roommate's tennis team and my neighbor across the street. And I came back and said, oh, I'm so tired, I got to go to bed. I look at my computer and this is on there. This is about the time I came back, and I decided I could turn it off now, or I could at least put Bill onto the ground. So let's see what happens here. And I thought I had Bill with me. I think I do. I do. This is going to be funny, guys. The next episode is going to show you what happens, or maybe I'll be able to add it into this, but the next episode or next part of this is going to show you what happens when you make one critical error. So Bill has the opportunity to go outside and grab the data from these things and reset them. So I actually have more times that I can actually use like the goo containers and the thermometers and other science experiments on here. So not being as proficient at flying as Jebediah or Valentina, he really has a hard time out here trying to get to the things he wants to get to. So he gets over here, he's going to record the data and take the data and move around the ship pretty nimbly and get everything he needs to get. So let's see. As he comes over here, this has got to be one that has something on it, right? And it's just going to float around. I wish he had like magnetic boots and he'd just stick to the side of it. Come on, grab on. They should put handholds or something on them for them to grab as they do this. Oh my God, come on. Up, 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 left, left, right, right, forward. This was fun, but it was frustrating at the same time. All right, so I guess this is going to be the things he does for the next 5 minutes, and just to give you an idea, this is not the most interesting thing to watch, or at least it wasn't for me. But moving around in space, if it's this hard, oh my God, I'm so close to that very, very, very delicate solar panel, you don't want to touch them because it's very simple to dislodge them and break them. So you really want to be very careful when you're working around these devices, around these parts. He's getting closer, closer. Can he get up? We auto-saved now. All right. So is there anything over here for him to get? I moved him over here so he wouldn't be near the solar panels. And he's going to fly down underneath. No. And come on, move in there, move in there. Come on, grab it. Ooh, you got the data. Take the data. Good job. Now where are you going? You're going to go on the other side. Ooh, you banged your face on the ladder, on the landing leg. Now these little micro landing legs are actually a pain in the butt, okay? The reason that they're a pain in the butt is that they're just long enough to be longer than the engine, but and that way, if the ground was hard, you'd actually be able to land, right? You'd be able to have no problem with getting clearance of your engine. But the problem is, anything you land on has a certain layer of silt or sand or thinness that your landing legs and your engine just sit into. So in this situation, the landing legs are just long enough to work, but they don't. I'm still going to have a wobble when I get down there. So let's go to the landing mode. Well, with Bill back inside the ship, we can set up for a landing. And the probes on the ship are actually giving it the ability for him to use SAS, which is pretty decent, right? So he is going to look to land somewhere around the equator. And the reason for that is when we take off, we want to take off going 90 degrees. So we're back in a 0-degree inclination. So let's see if we can get this done and move ahead to where we're actually setting down. I actually just said that, and then I realized that it was only a few seconds later that I started my deorbit burn. So here I am firing at the retrograde marker, and I'm going to try to just bring it down as close to the equator as I can. And I realize that that's a very shallow dive to the surface, and I'll probably wind up somewhere further up the line on that descent line than at the end of it. So we're going to hopefully get this done. So I'm going to bring the warp up as high as I can. We are falling a great distance, and right now I should have been at 10,000, right? 10 to 15,000. And I started my descent from much higher than that. So that means that I might be picking up some extra speed, and I might be burning some extra fuel. But I actually have a boatload of fuel in this particular ship, most of it being right in that center stage. Those outer stages I'm going to leave behind and thus free up some weight and make it a much more efficient escape of the moon's gravity. So let's just see how we do with this landing. I'm going to do the rest of it at 2x if you don't mind. Well, I decided to do it in 1.6x, and this should be a very good landing as I remember. And I've had quite a few missions after this one. With this being one of my days off, I did quite a number of these videos in one day, so I could stack them up, get them done. But as normal, work was just so much this week, I didn't have an opportunity to come home and finish these up. So we're burning, trying to kill all of that lateral velocity, and we're going to try to set it down in the flat part of the moon in between these craters. So you notice me now tipping my ship over just a little bit, and a little bit more, killing off that lateral velocity as much as I can, and letting the ship start to just fall flat. Now I want to make sure that it doesn't come down inside of that crater. That crater is going to have a steep edge and a steep outer edge, which would make landing safely very difficult. So you really want to conserve your fuel because you still got to get back, and that's the tough part. That's why landing on celestial bodies in our particular solar system is quite difficult, because a lot of them, even our number one goal in the future, Mars, without atmospheres, it means having to use rocket-assisted landings. Now, on Mars, you'd say it has an atmosphere, but it is so much thinner than the Earth's that actually being able to land there is going to be a little bit of a challenge. You're going to need huge parachutes, like 3, 4, 5 times the size of a parachute that you would have on Earth, but you're still going to need retro rocket burning or a rocket engine for the final descent. Now, as you're coming down, you want to keep your descent lower than 7 to 7.5 meters a second. I like to do it a little bit less, but that was a pretty decent landing. But you can see right there, you see what I mean by how everything sinks right in? So we're actually resting ourselves right on top of the engine, not on the legs at all. The legs were actually just there to stabilize everything in the end. I'm opening up all these solar panels because when everything is done, we're actually going to leave these probes and hope that one of them survives. So if we do get a mission to send back information or science data from the moon, we can do it. Well, folks, that is Bill's journey to the moon, and I think that it went fairly well. This is one of my more successful missions. I'm going to get Bill out, and you will see what happens with Bill in the next episode. And guys, if you want to get into Kerbal Space Program, they have a lot of deals from time to time, and with the summer sale nearing for Steam, I would definitely be looking out for it. The last time I saw it out there on the last sale, it was $12. Please think about getting this game because it is one of those sandbox building games and also has quite a fun career mode. And if you have any love of rocketry, I really do implore you to take part in the Kerbal Space Program experience. And with that said, you all be safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.